Live from Bryant-Denny Stadium, it's the Tighter Insider Signing Day Special on WVUA 23.
Thank God, all my family, all my coaching staff that developed me as a player. And without further ado, for the next 3 to 4 years, we attending University of Alabama.
And welcome in, everybody. Ben Davis from Gordo High School committing to the University of Alabama. Rodney, that was near the beginning of what has been an exhilarating National Signing Day, as is the case every year for Alabama. Alongside Rodney Orr from TighterInsider.com and Tighter Insider TV, I'm Gary Harris, WVUA 23 Sports Director, and it's been another exhilarating day with all kinds of storylines, and this is the Tighter Insider Signing Day Special, live from the Zone inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. The Red Elephant Club meeting is going to be going on behind us after our show. Nick Saban will be here, and we'll have Nick Saban coming up live from the Malmore Athletic Complex during our show. We have a ton of information and analysis to pass along over the next hour. As I said, we'll go live to the Naylor Stone Media Room in the Malmore Athletic Complex. You can see it there. Coke bottle already out, waiting on Nick Saban. Right around 4 o'clock, the coach will be there. But as we wait for Coach, let's get right to what we know and what it means for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Another huge move today that's put Alabama at the top or near the top of all the national recruiting rankings. And what better way to get started, Roddy, than with Ben Davis. Legacy player, his dad Wayne, an all-SEC linebacker, former NFL player, nearby Gordo High School, 30 minutes up Highway 82. But it was never a done deal until this morning. In fact, Ben Davis, after the signing, Rodney, told our Brandon cameraman that he was going back and forth this morning between Alabama and Auburn and did not even tell his parents. He really was torn, so it ended up being Alabama in the end, but he looked at everybody very closely, including the in-state rivals.
I do think he did look at everyone very closely. I think there was, to be honest with you, I think Ben was probably leaning to Alabama all along, but he certainly wanted to check out all of his options regardless. He's an outstanding talent. You see how athletic he is. That's a linebacker running down the field like that. Look at him. He looks like a wide receiver. He's very gifted athletically. You talk about his ability once you get him bigger and stronger, Gary. He could be a fantastic inside player. He's really smart, has instincts for the game. And, again, that athleticism you just can't coach.
We're going to talk later on in the program, Rod, about guys that can make an early impact. But he seems like he could be one that plays as a true freshman, not just on special teams, but possibly on defense as well.
Well, I think with the need in terms of some depth there at the inside linebacker spots, you could see him possibly get some time. And, again, his ability to do so many things well athletically will certainly help him.
Well, Rodney, as you said, there's no doubt Alabama was going to be difficult to beat in this process. But he gave Auburn a close look, Georgia, Notre Dame. He said through the entire process, you'll find out on signing day, he never tipped his hand. But today our Brandon cameraman did talk with Ben Davis about the draw that is Alabama and why he ultimately chose the Crimson Tide.
The draw for Alabama was, I just woke up this morning and I just thought to myself, where would I want to, wake up? Because, I'm going to have to, grind every day. So where would I want to do that at? I wouldn't want to be at one school wishing I was at another. So that's how I went.
So it did turn out to be Alabama, but as he said, he didn't even know until this morning. He was on the phone with coaches this morning. His parents didn't know until the last minute, but everybody, I think, associated with Ben Davis's family, including his parents, they would have supported him regardless, but they're thrilled that he wound up at the University of Alabama.
You're talking about the son of the all-time leading tackler in school history, certainly following in his dad's footsteps. He was a great player, signed as a freshman here 30-something years ago, 33 years ago. It was in Ray Perkins' first recruiting class. So, again, he's a legacy player, but he is a talent in his own right, Gary. This isn't a guy you take because of, he's got connections to the university or whatever it is. He is definitely one of the more gifted athletic linebackers in the country.
Well, his dad said he almost went to Auburn and Pat Dye over Alabama and Ray Perkins, but history repeated itself, his son also choosing the Crimson Tide over the Tigers. Well, one reason Alabama has shot to the top of the rankings has been a strong finish, and Davis wasn't the only one to wait until National Signing Day that picked Alabama. Jared Maiden, the outstanding cornerback from the state of Texas. Alabama and Oklahoma looked like it might be about 50-50, but he chose the Tide today.
Yeah, you know, we talked about a lot of these guys last night, and the ones that we thought would pick Alabama. Jared Maiden was one of those. He's a tremendous talent from the standpoint of he's very versatile. There you see how physical he is. And, Gary, he's extremely versatile from the standpoint he could play corner, he could play star, he could play safety. He's got cover skills. He's got tackling skills. There you see him. Again, just how strong his hands are when he grabs a player. So this guy is really a huge pickup because his dad played basketball at Oklahoma. His mom attended school at Oklahoma. He narrowed it down to Alabama and Oklahoma, and this is a big loss for the Sooners.
Well, Jared Maiden, a big loss for the Sooners, a big pickup for Alabama. Another big pickup today, Terrell Hall, the defensive end from the Washington, D.C. area. Once upon a time, he was an Ohio State commitment. Then it looked like he was a lock for Alabama, but boy, Ole Miss made a big push. The home state Maryland Terrapins took it down to the wire, but this is a 5-star defensive end, long, rangy, needs to add some weight, but he could be a dynamic playmaker on defense down the road.
Yeah, I think you're right in terms of, you know, when he gets bigger, there's no telling. He may be a Jonathan Allen type guy when you start projecting him for the future. From Washington, D.C., St. John's High School, he's a guy that, as Gary mentioned, there you see him, how athletic he is, how quick he is, those types of things. He was an early commitment to Ohio State. But, you know, there he is. What a play right there. And just an outstanding talent. Another guy that's in that same kind of mold that Nick Saban's recruited to bring here to Alabama that's built these great defenses.
Another 5-star for the Tide on defense. Shaheem Carter, the defensive back from Louisiana. It looked like Alabama might lose him to Ole Miss. Boy, Alabama and Ole Miss battling in recruiting. But today, he chose the Tide, and this is a young man, speaking that could play early, you're talking about a guy that's got incredible coverage skills. I know that's a tough spot to play as a freshman, but this guy's really good, really talented.
You know, he was originally committed to Alabama very early on. He decommitted. There was some thought that maybe he would go to Georgia, where Jeremy Pruitt recruited him there. Now Jeremy Pruitt back here as a defensive coordinator. And, you know, Shaheem's a fantastic player. There's no question about that. And you're right. Ole Miss was extremely disappointed to lose Shaheem Carter. They felt like if Alabama got Nigel Knock, that would have kind of opened the door for them to pick up Carter. But, you know, he opted with the Tide as well. So, and when you're also talking about the area where he comes from, where Alabama's had some success, it continues to keep that pipeline in the state of Louisiana going with Shaheem Carter from Kentwood.
Speaking of late commitments and signings, Irvin Smith, the tight end out of New Orleans, Rodney, right before we went on the air, he made it official. And this is a guy, until a couple weeks ago, we didn't hear much mention with him in regards to Alabama, but we know how valuable tight ends are, athletic, big, strong, fast tight ends. This guy fits the bill.
He does, and he's got the bloodlines. His dad was a former college football player at Notre Dame, played in the NFL, very athletic. A lot of people really, when you talk about a guy that maybe, if you want to say is a sleeper in the class, not that he's necessarily not rated highly, but a guy who maybe could be rated more highly, it's Irvin Smith. He has a lot of potential. You see his frame, Gary. He's going to really fill out. He's already a good blocker, and he's an outstanding receiver as well.
That's what I was going to say. You see him blocking in this video, and we know at Alabama, no matter how talented you are as a pass catcher, if you're going to play tight end, you better block, right?
Fantastic catch and coverage. No question about it. He's not afraid to mix it up. He has that kind of mentality that it takes to become a blocker or to be a really good blocker. He likes doing it. And there, look at him getting down the field, Gary. This guy, again, I think he's vastly underrated.
Big pickup late this afternoon for Alabama. Well, signings are still coming in. The rankings are subject to change. We know that once everybody has put pen to paper. But right now, Rodney, you see the shot that Alabama has taken in the rankings. Look at this. Scout number 1, Rivals number 1, up to ESPN number 2. And we know how difficult ESPN is as far as their grading process with Tom Luganville. And the 24/7 Sports Composite poll of all the polls gathered together, Alabama number 1 again. Man, and you wouldn't have thought that just a week ago.
It is amazing. And I think ESPN had Alabama like 10th coming into the day.
They did.
What a fantastic finish Alabama had today. And I don't know if actually ESPN's rating has incorporated Irvin Smith yet, because he just committed as we went on the air. So he's rated pretty highly in their star system. I think he's a 4. So you could see a clean sweep.
Well, there are obviously signings that are still going to come in for some of these schools. So as we said, ranking subject to change, but Alabama looking good right now. Well, still to come on the Tider Insider TV National Signing Day special. Next year's class didn't just come together today, far from it. Find out more about the 2016 early enrollees. That's right, they're already at Alabama. And you've heard about Ben Davis, but he wasn't the only Tide signee from Sweet Home, Alabama. We'll break down the in-state commitments right after this timeout. This is the Alabama Tider Insider Signing Day special. Nick Saban will be at the podium later. We'll have that live for you as well. Stick around. More coming up right after this timeout.
You're watching the Tider Insider Signing Day special on WVUA 23.
I'll be attending the University of Alabama.
Mack Wilson. Welcome back to the Tider Insider Signing Day special presented by Buffalo Rock Bottling Company, live inside the zone here in the north end zone at Bryant-Denny Stadium. The Red Elephant Club meeting going on behind us. Rodney Orr, Gary Harris, and of course, you know who you are watching us at home. Well, Nick Saban and his coaches, Rod, will go all over the country to gather premier talent, but they also, of course, fight to take care of home base. That's in-state, and that was just one of the Alabama football players that we saw there, Mack Wilson, that decided to sign with the Tide today, 5-star linebacker from Montgomery Carver. But not just Wilson staying home for Alabama. You know, when it comes down to it, if you get a chance to play for the in-state Crimson Tide, you usually take it.
Auburn was just like my lifelong dream to go to Auburn, and I really never thought about what I want to do after college, and I really just took time out and really visualized everything as like a student first, then an athlete, and it was just Alabama. I developed a relationship with Alabama since like the 9th grade, and you know, it really wasn't like a choice for me because I grew up rooting for Alabama, and I always dreamed about playing for them. So I mean, I went with it. I feel like football is my ticket, and I really want to provide for my family, and I believe that I'll get better as a player at the University of Alabama. So I was 100% from the beginning. When I'm all in, I'm all in.
When I'm all in, Deontay Brown said, and he has never wavered. All right, Rodney, you take a look at these in-state signees, and again, Alabama's recruiting the best of the best. But the best in the state, Nick Saban makes a priority of getting those guys. Davis, Wilson, Williams, and Brown, all highly rated players that were priorities for this 2016 signing class.
I think they're all magnificent talents, Gary, when you look at it potentially. We talked about Davis. We know about Mack Wilson, who's one of the elite linebackers in the country. Quentin Williams probably did not get his due. He was underrated early. People started kind of catching on to him as the process started moving along, but you know, he committed to Alabama, originally committed to Auburn, then committed to Alabama so early that, you know, people didn't really kind of pay as much attention to him. And then Deontay Brown, I think when you're talking about a guy that has all the tools, when he gets in the weight room, gets conditioned, and gets his weight where it needs to be, he's going to be a guy that's going to be a fantastic player. He's got great feet. I think he moves a lot like Chance Warmack when I watch him.
Okay, I want to go in depth on each one of these guys. You did a great job of kind of talking about all of them as a group. We've already talked about Ben Davis, but let's start with Lindell Mack Wilson. Again, outstanding athlete, terrific basketball player, fast, could make an impact on special teams right away. But Mack Wilson is a guy that you're looking for speed, you're looking for athleticism at that outside linebacker position. He's got both.
Well, and the thing about it is his versatility, because he can play inside too. And I think Alabama, when you start looking at Mack Wilson, I won't be surprised if they keep he and Ben Davis inside initially, give them a look. They could be really a dynamic duo, almost like a Reggie Ragland, Reuben Foster type combination, again, as you start projecting ahead. And he's a really top-notch player. There's no doubt about that. And I thought the thing that was really interesting in his comments was how he talked about it was always his dream to play for Alabama. He knew he was coming to Alabama. But how about all the talk previous to that about Florida and Georgia, Gary?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. I mean, Alabama goes into other states. It's just part of the recruiting. But how important is it for Alabama to protect the home turf? And when a school like Georgia and a school like Florida makes one of your guys a priority, that you say, hey, when it's all said and done, we're going to get the guys we want in our own state.
Well, yeah, I think so. And I think when you look at the state of Alabama, year in and year out, historically, they've been a very difficult state in terms of out-of-state teams coming in and trying to get the top players, whether it be Alabama or Auburn, always kind of dominated the state. Now, as you start looking towards the battles with Auburn that they've had, I mean, with these 4 guys, they pretty much controlled the state of Alabama, getting the top players in terms of the elite players.
And Quinnen Williams, you already talked about him as well, but Winona High School, Birmingham product. We know how important recruiting Birmingham is for the Crimson Tide and has been through the years. And this is a typical Alabama inside defensive lineman. Yes, he can play the run, but he's also athletic enough to rush the passer. I hate to compare anybody to Marcel Darius that came out of Huffman a few years ago, and he's not as big. But I tell you what, he's a disruptive force. And as you said, why he hasn't gotten more national attention boggles my mind.
Yeah, I mean, when you watch him, I mean, he's as good as a lot of these guys who are rated a little bit higher. And again, I think he's rated a 4-star player, but you look at his body, you can tell he's going to fill out. He's very athletic. He dominated games at times this year. And I think when you look at Quinnen Williams, it's the ceiling that he has in terms of getting better and improving that is so high. This guy, 2 or 3, 4 years down the road, there's no telling how good he could be.
And just a real quick mention again on Deontay Brown, Austin High School in Decatur, huge man. Tackle or guard, where do you think he best fits?
I think he's a guard. Although he has feet to play, I think he's going to be ideally an offensive guard.
All right, he is a space eater. He is a big man. All right, all of these players finalizing their decisions today, but joining a lot of other guys that wrapped up the process earlier. We mentioned Quinnen Williams. He's been committed for a while, but Rodney, 7 players not only committed early, they were able to sign, finish up high school or junior college, and enroll here in January. Let's talk about the guys already on campus, and let's start with Jonah Williams out there in California. This is a guy could have gone anywhere in the country. Not only is he talented at offensive tackle, he's got a nasty streak, and I mean that as a compliment. I mean, he'll compete with you. He'll battle. He takes it personally when somebody makes a play on him.
You love a guy that has that leader mentality that's very intense. Jonah Williams has that. He also has the talent to play, and the versatility to play right tackle, to play left tackle. He committed early in the spring. It surprised a lot of people because I think his dad went to Georgia, his mom went to Auburn, or vice versa. He has ties to both of those schools with his parents, and they were kind of shocked, those 2 schools, when he committed to Alabama early. But there's a lot of people, Gary, when you talk to them that follow the college football recruiting, that think this guy may be the best offensive tackle in the country in this class.
Heavy hands. Did you see him getting his hands on those guys and just putting them on the ground?
Yeah, his potential's unlimited.
Yeah. All right, another guy that figures at offensive tackle, may even plan on being a starter at right tackle right away, is Charles Baldwin out of ASA College in New York, community college player already enrolled. This is another big physical specimen at offensive tackle.
Well, when you sign a junior college player, as Nick Saban's track record indicates here at Alabama, when he signed junior college players, generally, vast majority of the time, they come in and make an immediate contribution. You look at Charles Baldwin, that right tackle spot with Dominic Jackson leaving, who was a junior college player himself when he got here, came into the program. You look at Charles Baldwin, he going through spring practice, which he's going to do, is going to allow him an opportunity to compete really strongly for that right tackle spot.
All right, quarterbacks are important. It's such a huge boost, though, when a quarterback can enroll in January. Jalen Hurts has been able to do that.
Yeah, I think when you're a quarterback, the opportunity to go through spring practice, it kind of helps you get acclimated to everything, every position, but really quarterback, kind of get your feet wet. The thing I like about Jalen Hurts, he's very talented. You saw him just move around in the pocket there, just sidestep a guy and step up and make a throw. He's very calm in the pocket, but when you force him to move, I kind of say he's a little bit like David Palmer. He's got moves to kind of get himself out of trouble, and he's just a really outstanding talent. But another thing is the fact that he is a son of a high school coach. He grasps things really, really quickly. And I think when you start projecting down the road, he's a guy that's going to really be a competitor in the quarterback race.
That's 3 of 7 early enrollees already in school, and they will go through spring practice. Well, still to come on the Tider Insider Television Signing Day Special. It's never a rebuilding year at Alabama, but find out how the Tide will replace another championship roster. And that includes last year's top college football defense, the best defense in the game. After losing standouts like Ashawn Robinson and Reggie Ragland, find out who's on deck for the Tide D. That's next on the Tider Insider Signing Day Special. And, of course, Nick Saban is coming up as well. There's a live look at the podium inside the Naylor Stone Media Room at the Mount Moore Athletic Complex. We got you covered here on the Tider Insider Signing Day Special, presented by Buffalo Rock We're back with more live from the Zone inside Bryant-Denny Stadium right after this. We're back inside the Zone at Bryant-Denny Stadium in the north end zone for our Tighter Insider Signing Day Special. And today's Tighter Insider Signing Day Special is brought to you by our good friends at Buffalo Rock Bottling Company, longtime sponsor of Tighter Insider TV. We appreciate them being with us again today for our Tighter Insider Signing Day Special. I'm Gary Harris, joined of course by Rodney Orr from Tighter Insider TV and TighterInsider.com. Again, we are minutes away from Nick Saban's signing day press conference. We'll take you live to the Malmore Athletic Complex as soon as Coach is at the podium. But one of the things that he's likely going to address is Alabama's dominance on defense, and how when you lose players like Ashawn Robinson and Reggie Ragland and Denzel Duvall and Darren Lake and Cyrus Jones, and it goes on, how you have to replenish that roster with other great players. And on defense, Rodney, defensive line is always a priority, and Alabama really seems like it filled some needs with this year's class. Well,
we talked about some of those guys. Obviously, Quinnen Williams is one of those from Winona that we just mentioned. Raekwon Davis is a guy from Meridian that's 6'7", 325 pounds, and can run like a deer. I mean, this guy has unlimited potential. Jamar King is a 26-year-old junior college player, Gary, that just signed with Alabama today, chose Alabama over Ohio State. And he's a big, strong guy that's kind of raw, but again, with Bo Davis coaching, I think he'll be an outstanding, prospect. So I think Alabama did really well. How about the Hulk?
I was going to say, don't forget Kendall Jones.
I mean, he's 370 pounds. He's got to lose about 40 pounds, but this guy's a really talented guy. Again, the key is getting him in here, get him in the program, and getting him in shape.
Yeah, but on Kendall Jones, I want to ask you, of course, I don't know many people to the 370, but I don't know that I've ever seen anybody carry 370 as well as Kendall Jones does.
Yeah, he's gotten a little heavier, but again, I think, 30 or 40 pounds off of him, and he is going to be a terrific player.
And we've already talked about some of the linebackers. I mean, this has got a chance to be a really special class in this linebacking core, and that's always going back to whether it was Perkins, Coach Bryant, Gene Stallings. Alabama prides itself on having great linebacking, and they're going to get some more this year.
Well, again, we talked about Ben Davis, we talked about Mack Wilson, and I kind of compared them to a little bit of that dynamic duo of a Reggie Ragland and Reuben Foster types on the inside, and then Terrell Hall, he's a guy that could play jack linebacker, or again, he could be like Jonathan Allen, who came in as a jack linebacker and become a really outstanding defensive end type player. So I think Alabama's really addressed its needs. It probably would have liked to have gotten McKay Juarez out of California, who opted for UCLA. But at the same time, Gary, when you get three guys of this magnitude, you're talking about 3 5-star linebacker types.
And in the back end, we've already talked a lot about the two from today, Maiden and Carter, but Nigel Knott on Monday. I mean, what a speedster this guy is at corner.
4'3", 240, has a 46-inch vertical out of Madison, Mississippi, and I think that's another key stat for him is the fact that he is from Mississippi, the state of Mississippi, so that allows Alabama to really recruit that state, continue to recruit that state, because it's been difficult to get players out of there. But Nigel Knott, Shaheem Carter, who we talked about earlier, I think a guy to really watch out for maybe as a future potential safety might be Trevon Diggs out of Maryland. He's an outstanding athlete, listed as a wide receiver. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Eddie Jackson coming out of high school, who played wide receiver as well, if you remember. Long, athletic. So I would really keep an eye on Trevon Diggs possibly ending up in that safety spot, as well as we talked about earlier as Jared Maiden, and he is a terrific talent.
And Cyrus Jones and Geno Smith leave, and you bring in more talent to replace those guys. Again, there's a live look at the Naylor Stone Media Room inside the Malmore Athletic Complex. We're awaiting the arrival of Nick Saban any minute now. And the coach, again, we say for coaches, signing days like Christmas, they're opening up about 25 new presents. He's going to talk about this class, everything from fulfilling needs, which, let's be honest with it, Rodney, fulfilling needs is just as important as star power. You better address where you need help and get it, and that may be where Nick Saban's at his best.
Needed offensive tackles. I think he's walking to the
Here he is. Here's
now.
the coach.
This game is bigger than black So I think we limit ourselves when we just label ourselves just black.
Okay, obviously some audio difficulties there with the feed from the Malmore Athletic Complex. Nick Saban addressing the media there, and we're going to try to get that straightened out and go back to the coach. Obviously, we want to hear from him. Rodney, while we're trying to get these audio issues addressed, I mean, we can hear him here. We're just not hearing him on television. But what, you know, again, just your thoughts on this class overall.
Well, again, I think obviously it speaks for itself. We were talking about some of the needs that Alabama had to fulfill. We knew that offensive tackles, they've been short on those for a few years. You got three really outstanding offensive tackles. Charles Baldwin, the junior college player, Jonah Williams, who we showed you earlier. Scott Lashley is a fantastic player potentially out of the state of Mississippi that was a big pickup. Many thought that he was locked up for Mississippi State. So for Alabama to land him late like they did is really quite a job by the coaching staff. As you look at some other spots on the offensive side of the ball, they needed running backs. They don't have a lot of depth there for the first time in a long time since Nick Saban's been here. You look at a guy like B.J. Emmons, #1 all-purpose running back in the country, according to Rivals.com. He kind of fits that Nick
Approaching,
Saban
he needs to
mold.
focus on that.
So,
and furthermore,
he's 220 pounds. Gary has size. He has speed. Then how about today signing Joshua Jacobs, the little running back out of Oklahoma? It's about a 195-pounder that's really an electric player. So those are two really big pickups from a depth standpoint. Maybe if you're talking about an area that they would have liked to have done a little better offensively, would have been wide receiver. You know, you don't get A.J. Jones, out of Starkville, Mississippi. You miss out on A.J. Brown. And that's a loss there in that regard, looking for a big physical wide receiver. But, you know, again, they did get some really solid players at the position, too, including Clay Chalkville standout T.J. Simmons. Defensively, you look at it, we talked about the defensive line. I think they filled needs there and at linebacker and brought in a lot of talent in the secondary. So, you know, for the most part, I think they filled their needs.
All right, we've been looking at video of Ben Davis again. We've talked about the defense, though, in depth. Let's talk about replacing needs on offense, and clearly there's some guys already on the roster that will play a big part in that. But, you know, they signed a quarterback in Jalen Hurts. He's already on campus. Some big offensive tackles that we've addressed, a couple of running backs in this class, some help at receiver. Just offensively, your thoughts on the guys that have been signed on that side of the ball?
Well, as I was saying, I think that, you know, they did a really good job with offensive tackles. They got a great guard in Deontay Brown. They got another really fantastic player who entered school early, Chris Owens, who I think's got a lot of ability as an interior player on the offensive side of the ball. We talked about the running backs just a minute ago. Those two guys will fill some needs from a depth standpoint. And again, I just think that maybe if you had a spot offensively that they could have done a little bit better, or would have hoped to have done a little bit better, because they certainly tried. It's losing out on a guy like an A.J. Brown, who's a big physical wide receiver, a guy that maybe brings a Julio Jones type of dimension to the offense. But, you know, again, they recruited him as hard as they could. He ended up going to Ole Miss.
Again, Nick Saban addressing the media right now at the Naylor Stone Media Room. We're having some technical difficulties getting the audio from that press conference. Hopefully we're recording it, and if nothing else, if we can get it recorded, we'll try to bring you some of that sound here in just a little bit. All right, let's take a break here on the program. The Tider Insider Signing Day special live from the Zone inside Bryant-Denny Stadium, presented by Buffalo Rock. And we'll be back with more National Signing Day coverage right here on WVUA 23.
Insider Signing Day Special on
On Monday, Alabama freshman quarterback Blake Barnett, a 5-star recruit in last year's class, took to Twitter to do his own recruiting. Barnett said, "I'll keep it simple. I got 16 reasons why you should commit to UA. The chances of there being 17 reasons next year is likely." Well, Nigel Knott, who committed to the Tide earlier in that day, retweeted Barnett with a little extra motivation. Knott wrote, "I can give you 20 reasons for the class of 2020. How's that for some confidence? And Rodney, no doubt, as talented as Alabama is, this is a program where often you have to wait your turn to get your chance to play. But even Alabama has true freshmen that make an impact. We see it every year. Calvin Ridley, a 1,000-yard receiver, as a true freshman this past season for the Crimson Tide. Let's talk some true freshmen this year that might make an immediate impact in this particular class. Who you got?
Well, I mean, when you're talking about a guy that hasn't even practiced, it's really kind of difficult to say. And you know, we talked about the inside linebackers and the fact that Alabama may need some depth there, some contribution, maybe from a Mack Wilson or a Ben Davis. And the athleticism in the secondary. We saw how Minkah Fitzpatrick came in this past year and made a great contribution in the secondary. You could have some freshmen come in. Some of the guys we talked about, Jared Maiden, Trevon Diggs is a guy that could be a safety. There you see B.J. Emmons.
Yeah, what about
that is
B.J.
a guy that I was talking about earlier, the #1 offense, all-purpose back in the country. And when you look at him, Gary, he's got the size, he's got the speed, he's a very aggressive runner. Look at him. He's spin moves. He has that same kind of style that Alabama backs throughout the past have had. That's Raekwon Davis. I told you about him earlier.
Yeah.
6'7", 325 pounds, no fat. Look at that guy. I mean, it's an unbelievable physical specimen.
And, of course, Charles Baldwin at offensive tackle, probably counting on him to play.
And a junior college player, so he's got a little bit more experience. He's a guy that, as we mentioned, being in here in the spring, having an opportunity to go through those 15 practices certainly will help him in terms of competing for that right tackle spot.
Yeah, Alabama doesn't go to the junior college ranks very often, but they've got a great track record. This year, a defensive lineman in King, an offensive lineman in Baldwin, and as you mentioned, King's 26 years old. You got to figure, as we said, both of those guys are going to play this year.
Well, you would sure think so, and King hasn't played much football.
Right.
I mean, he came back to junior college obviously at an older age, but he has a lot of talent. He's a big, strong guy, and you know, the maturity factor should help him.
Well, one thing about Alabama, and again, you know, Nick Saban has a process in place. Oftentimes, five-star guys have to wait their turn. But he has shown, regardless of how much talent is on the roster, how many upperclassmen there are, if there's a true freshman, Ridley, Minkah Fitzpatrick, it goes on and on. If you're good enough, you will play. And I think that's very appealing to the high school players that are out there, not only to have a chance to play as a freshman, but a lot of times if you're a freshman and you're playing early, it's because your team's not good. But at Alabama, if you're playing early, it's because you're really good, because we know there's talent on the roster.
Well, no doubt about that. And I think one of the bigger keys, and I just mentioned him a few minutes ago, was the significant contribution made by Minkah Fitzpatrick from that star spot. Now, on special teams, he made a lot of really big plays on special teams this past year. We kind of overlook that sometimes about how important special teams can be. And when you're an athletic freshman, a guy that can come in and help on special teams with your ability in terms of the speed and your athletic ability, that's very valuable.
Let's talk about the impact of recruiting as we're looking at another Red Elephant Club meeting here, getting ready for the coaches to come over here in just a little bit and address the crowd. And I've said this on my radio show this week, Rodney, certainly you can show me cases of five-star players that didn't pan out. And I can show you cases of guys that were not rated very highly or not rated at all that became college players and good college players, NFL players. But the reality of it is, more times than not, the most highly rated high school players become the best college players. And if you recruit nationally rated classes, your chances of being successful increase. We've seen it here at Alabama. That's just a fact. That's why recruiting is so important. Yes, we see schools that do a great job of maybe getting under the radar guys, but to win consistently like Alabama has won, it does start with not just a great class here and there, but recruiting consistently well every year.
And that's what they've done. We talked about, 7 out of the last 8 years they've had the #1 recruiting class, which is, you know, highly subjective. We know that. But I think really what makes Alabama successful is not just getting the players, but once they get them here, they're very good at developing them in every way to fit into the program. And I think they also do a very good job of evaluating not only needs, but what type of player will fit into the program. I'm talking about from a mentality standpoint, someone that can really work, have the work ethic, that can be successful in this program and what they require in the off-season program, go into fall camp, and throughout a season. So I think they do a really great job of evaluating those players.
Well, we see the fans behind us gathering here. It's easy to say the fans get spoiled, but I don't think that's the case. I think they still just get just excited about a top-rated recruiting class every year, regardless of how many you've had.
Well, and I think the difference is now, Gary, is it's so competitive. If you slip, then all of a sudden, and I'm talking about fans, they hear all these other, the Ole Miss people, the Auburn fans, the LSU fans, whatever it might be, you know, so that keeps the fans competitive. That keeps their mentality, so to speak. They don't become complacent. You see here, you talked about a full house here. So I think when you look at it from that standpoint, there's no question that the Alabama fans are still excited over #1 recruiting classes.
Okay, we are going to take a break here on our Tider Insider National Signing Day special, brought to you by Buffalo Rock, live from inside the zone in the north end zone at Bryant-Denny Stadium. We'll be back with much more right here. Alabama, another great class on National Signing Day. We're excited to be a part of it, excited you're with us, and we'll be back right after this. Well, it's always a big decision for a student to put a hat on signing day, which hat. But once the announcement is made, it's supposed to be the easy part. But for Holy Spirit's Tommy Hargo, getting the hat on proved to be quite a challenge. Hargo sports a nice mane on his head, and you know what? He needed some help from his coach to get the hat on. And you can hear more about Hargo and all of the other local West Alabama signees coming up next on our West Alabama Signing Day wrap-up show with Jen Chapman and Brandon Cameron, and that's coming up right here on WVUA 23 right after our Tider Insider Signing Day special is over. Right now, Rodney, let's take a look at the SEC recruiting rankings. We know that Alabama rates near the top nationally, so that, of course, means that they're going to rate near the top of the SEC. And this is impressive because there was at one point today where Alabama was 4th in the SEC. LSU, Ole Miss, and Georgia were all ahead of the Crimson Tide. And now you look up now, it speaks again to just how well this coaching staff recruits and how they close the deal. Pat Dye used to say the big dogs walk late. Well, Alabama signed their share of big dogs today.
They sure did. There's no question about, we talked about their fast finish, how they jumped up from about number 10 in the country according to some rankings all the way to number 1 in most of them. But you know what's amazing? It's not just competitiveness in terms of the schools. It's the fans themselves who really get into this recruiting and the recruiting rankings, and the fact that Alabama moving ahead. LSU had been number 1 in most of these polls coming into today. And I saw some reaction of from their fans, and it was amazing. You would have thought they lost another game to Alabama when they saw Alabama moving ahead in the recruiting rankings.
Yeah, you would have. It's that competitive. Well, let's be honest. I mean, in the SEC, everything's a competition, from hiring assistant coaches to facilities, who's got the nicest locker room, who's got the best stadium, who's got the best fans, who's got the prettiest cheerleaders. Everything's a competition. But next to winning the games on the field, winning championships, National Signing Day probably is the biggest thing that fans grab onto. And it resonates with fans. Yes, you still got to go out on the field, and that's what makes Alabama doubly good, is they don't only sign the players, they develop them and win 4 national championships in 7 years. But Ole Miss, LSU, Georgia, Florida, Auburn, they want to beat Alabama on National Signing Day too. So it's doubly frustrating when you can't beat them on the field and then you can't beat them in the recruiting rankings, and they probably go hand in hand.
Well, and they look at these rankings as a way to kind of evaluate or project the future when you're talking about each one of these programs. So I think that's one reason why you have fans that get so hyped up about it.
Indeed. I mean, it's the second season, and like we said, it's really like Christmas for football fans. You get to unwrap about 25 new presents, and certainly Alabama has unwrapped a lot of really expensive presents in regards to potential at winning games on the field. Top shelf recruits today for the Crimson Tide. Well, those rankings that we saw in the SEC are from composite rankings compiled by 24/7 Sports. So Alabama, once again, going to be a consensus, if not unanimous, pick as the best recruiting class in the SEC. And again, that's saying something. When you look at how LSU recruited, Ole Miss, Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee, all the rest of them, when you lead this league in recruiting, you have really, really done something. But again, Rodney, like we've talked about, the proof is in the pudding. and that is taking it out on the field. There are a lot of schools that recruit well, but they're still looking. We mentioned Ole Miss. They managed to beat Alabama on the field the last 2 years, but they're still trying to make their first ever trip to Atlanta. And that, at the end of the day, is how you're ultimately judged your recruiting classes, is by what happens on the field 2-3 years down the road, and that's where Alabama's winning as well.
Well, and I think when you look at the track record, it's obvious. It's one of the greatest runs in the history of college football, 4 of the last 7 national championships. So you say that to say this. When you're recruiting a player, you're going to go in there and you're not going to tell them, hey, we're trying to build a program to win a national championship. We're telling them, if you come here, you're probably going to win a national championship. Nick Saban has never signed a recruiting class, never signed a recruiting class. Think about that, never. Even at LSU, he's never signed a recruiting class that did not win a national championship.
Wow. Wow.
That's a process.
Says it all.
That's the process.
I mean, it absolutely says it all. And I want to mention something, too, while you're up here. Obviously, our television show, Tider Insider TV, has been hugely popular now on for how many years, Rod?
About 17.
Yeah,
now.
you know, and it continues to be really well supported. But the whole concept of the TV show comes from your website, TiderInsider.com, and I want to let you get a plug in for the website. I mean, you're taking a break now to do the TV show, but you've been on since early this morning with recruiting updates, player profiles. You've got some writers that help you, and of course the forum is where information is exchanged by fans, and there's nothing that happens regarding Alabama that won't be on your website in some capacity.
Well, for example, last night we were up at 1:30 in the morning going back and forth with fans on our message board who had questions, and we're sharing information and those types of things. And then we're back up at 6 o'clock this morning, so we got about 5.5 hours off. And, you know, Gary, they're going at it full blast again. So Alabama fans, nonstop, the interest, and they're on our forum. It's if you're looking to discuss Alabama football, it's nonstop.
Yeah, it's great. Check it out if you haven't done so already. All right, we got to take our final break here on our Tider Insider National Signing Day special presented by Buffalo Rock. Live from the zone inside Bryant-Denny Stadium's north end zone. The Red Elephant Club members getting ready to hear from the coaches. That'll be after we leave. But we'll come back to wrap up our show right after this on WVUA 23. Stay connected.
You're watching the Tider Insider Signing Day Special on WVUA 23.
And welcome back to the Tider Insider Signing Day Special here on WVUA 23 with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Thanks to Buffalo Rock for sponsoring the program today, and also thanks to our good friend Alex Gatewood and the staff at the Locker Room, Tuscaloosa's premier men's clothier, located at their new location in downtown Tuscaloosa. But not just for men now, they have ladies wear as well. In fact, the original elephant wear, that's the home of that great line of clothing and great suits like the one Rodney's sporting today. Brand new suit that Mr. Gatewood put you in for the program here, buddy.
He did. He sure did.
I got to get by and see him. That looks really, really sharp. But again, the Locker Room, great place to shop, and the staff is courteous, and they will take their time with you. You'll really enjoy the shopping process. But also, if you're not in Tuscaloosa, you don't know when you're going to come, shop online at the locker-room.biz. You can get it all right there. Order online, they'll ship it to you, and you can really look great for the spring in men's clothing from the Locker Room, and ladies' clothing as well. Well, Rodney, we're about to wrap it up. I think we've gone about as in-depth as we can in this class, breaking it down. But again, we'll wait for the final rankings by the recruiting services to be compiled tonight and tomorrow. But my guess is Alabama's going to be a consensus #1, if not a unanimous #1. I got a feeling that ESPN's going to keep them at 2 or 3, but I think they might wind up winning the rest of the rankings. And just another incredible class. That's all you can say.
Just keeps going, keeps rolling on, kind of like the national championships. You know, recruiting just keeps rolling on. Again, not only have they been a dynasty on the field, but they've been a dynasty that's never been seen before in recruiting.
And first class, too. All right, we're going to close out the program. More coverage coming up. Our local signing day wrap-up show coming up at 4:30 with Jen Chapman and Brandon Cameraman. I'll be back with you at 5. Rodney will join me at 5 for for more analysis. Then at 6, we're going to hear from Coach Saban, more local recruiting coverage as well. And I'll see you again tonight at 10 on the news at 10 as well. So for Rodney Orr and our entire staff here at WVUA 23, thanks for watching the Tider Insider Signing Day Special presented by Buffalo Rock, Alabama. #1 again. It never gets old, does it? Roll Tide, everybody. Have a good evening.